Hey, in this lesson, we are going to be exploring applying display flex to page elements. So we're going to create some HTML code with some elements that are nested within that main parent, apply the display flex to the parent, and then try out all of the different options that we have for column reverse for the flex directions. We're also going to show you and explore how the flex wrap works and the different options that you have for the flex direction for the page elements. So that's all coming up in this lesson. We're going to have the editor on the left-hand side and the display window in the browser on the right-hand side. Go ahead, open up your editors and create a file. I'm going to call it flex.html, and then within the HTML file, create some elements. So we've got a main container. You can give it a class of main for the main container. And then within that main container, go ahead and add some additional divs so that we have some elements that we can apply the styling to. And you can give them names. So I just call it L1 and then all the way down. So we call it element 1. And duplicate that. So get element 2 and create a few more. So element 3, I'm just renaming the class so that we can select them individually as well if needed, as well as the content that's being output within the element is going to be different as well. So we've got unique content there so that we can distinguish the various page elements as we move them around the page. And actually let's do a few more so that we end up with 8 separate elements on the page, and then we're going to apply the flex styling to these various elements. I've got the browser opened up on the right hand side, and then we've got the preview here showing where we've got all of the page elements. So next up we want to apply some styling. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to link to a style sheet, and we'll create that style sheet. And then we'll manipulate the style sheet content and make some adjustments to it to apply styling. So this is a rel style sheet. The type is going to be text/CSS as we're getting a CSS file. And then for the link for the file, it's going to be flex.css. And then go ahead and save that and then create the new file. I call it flex CSS, and that's the file that we're linking to from the HTML document. So we can now apply styling to that page, and I've linked it within the same folder directory as I have my flex HTML. So first up, let's select the main container, and just to make sure that we do have it selected properly, let's apply a background color to the main container. So we see it getting presented here on the right hand side within the browser. So that means that our style sheet is connected. And we want to apply some styling to the elements. So if we want to apply the flex box, that's done with display and flex within the parent. And that will display it as flex. And we also need to apply some styling to the elements that are contained under main. So under main and any div that's directly under main, we're going to apply some styling to it. And let's add in a border so that we can see each one of the elements. So as soon as we changed it to display flex, that automatically displayed them across the top there. And so this is flex display, and we need to still apply some additional styling to these elements. But what the display flex does is that it automatically sets them to go horizontally across instead of the default, which is just the vertical for the display. So just applying the flex within the parent is going to allow us to apply that type of styling. Let's also add some additional styling, so like text align. So we'll center align the text so that the content is centered. Also, let's add in a little bit of padding to the elements, but we just do 2 pixels padding to the element. And I'm also going to use the box sizing and apply that to all elements. So this will force the sizing. If I use the border box, it'll force all of the sizing to be inclusive of borders and spacing. So that will better align the content and allow us to work with the full values of the widths that we want to use. So for the flex, you can apply a flex wrap property. And what flex wrap does is you've got several options. So there's no wrap, there's wrap reverse, then inherent, initial, and unset. So by default, we're at no wrap. So if we want to set wrap, what's going to happen is that the elements are automatically going to take the default width, and if they need to go to the next line, then they're going to wrap to the next line. Let's take a look at some of the other options. So we've got the wrap reverse. And what the wrap reverse does is that has element 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but then 7 and 8 are on top because the wrap, instead of going underneath, it's wrap reverse. So it's showing it on top. And then inherent will inherit from the parent. So that will just bring it back to what the default was because we don't have any properties for the parent. So let's keep it at wrap, and we'll add flex direction. So we can actually control the direction using the flex direction. And for flex direction, we do have several options. So we have column, column reverse, row reverse. So if we use just column, it's going to actually set them and set all of the elements to be column formatted. You can also do a column reverse. And keep in mind that you don't have to update any of the child elements. You're just updating the parent, and the parent element is applying the styling to the children. So with the column reverse, we've got element 1 at the bottom, 2, 3, 4, all the way down. I'm actually also going to set a minimum height for the elements, so we get a little bit more spacing there for the elements. And I'll do a line height as well, so that will center the text there in the middle. So it's a little bit easier there to see. So the first one is now at the bottom, and number 8 is at the top. Let's apply some styling so we can easier see the elements on the page. So selecting the class, and I'm going to update the background color. So set the background color for the first element to red and the last element to blue so that we can easily see it within the display area, and we can make the adjustments as needed. So when we do the column reverse, it reverses the order, the default order. If we just do column, then it keeps it within that original column structure. There was also the row format. And what the row format does is it brings it back to that default was where we saw the row, and because we've got the flex wrap, we're wrapping it to the next line. And then there's also the row reverse. So when we row reverse, it stacks it over to the right hand side, starting at element 1 to the top right, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because it needs the next row, it's going to automatically wrap to the next row. If you get rid of the flex wrap, that's going to squeeze all of the elements, but it's going to keep them within the reverse order of what the default was. So remember, within the coding, we have element 1 first, but because we've got the row reverse, it's going to be displaying them within the opposite order. And I usually do like to keep the wrap in, and otherwise it's going to automatically resize the elements. If you keep the wrap in, it's going to use whatever the default sizing is for those elements. So if you were to have a width for the elements, so let's say you had 100 pixels for the elements, then without the wrap, it's still going to squeeze the elements in, but you're not going to get that default width of 100%. So if I do a minimum width of 100, that's going to actually push the elements without the wrap off the page. So generally, that's why I do say that we include the wrap for most of the time, because we do want the elements all to be seen on the page. And you didn't get any kind of scroll bar or anything like that if you're forcing the width of them and you're not including the wrap. So that's a few things to keep in mind when you're working with the flex, the display flex, and these are some of the options that you have for the parent when you're setting up the display. So what the display flex does is it defines the flex container. So depending on inline or block, depending on the given value, it enables the flex container for all its direct children. So that means that only the children that are directly within main are getting affected. So if I had a number of other elements within element 1, and I'm going to actually remove that. I know this looks a little bit confusing, but we still have the element 1 as red. So it doesn't affect the children that are contained, it's only within that main class. So that flex property, display flex, only applies to the direct children of that main container. The flex direction establishes the axis, so direction of the flex. So we had the different directions where we could do the row reverse, column. So those are all just different ways. And also there was the optional for wrapping. So if you have a single direction layout concept, then you can just use either the row or the row reverse or the column and column reverse, and that will update how the elements get displayed on the page. So column will automatically stack them like this, and then column reverse will do the opposite and reverse order them. So let's try column reverse one more time. So now we're starting at element 8 and working all the way down to element 1. So the flex wrap, so by default, if you don't use the wrap, it's going to try to include all of the elements into the one line. And because I'm using the column, we're not actually seeing what's happening here. So when I save that, by default without the wrap, it's going to automatically try to include them. And as we saw, if we do a minimum width, then we're actually not going to see the elements. So the no wrap is the default. The wrap will wrap into multiple lines from the top to bottom, and the reverse will do the bottom to the top. So it will just change the way that the direction of the wrap. So let's go ahead and keep the wrap back in. So now it's up to you. Go ahead, create an HTML page, create a main container and some elements within that main container, and then apply some of these flex properties that we've seen to the main parent container. And you'll be ready to move on to the next lesson.